Well, it is truly an honor and pleasure to be here. What an amazing mission, what an amazing project this is. I have to thank, and I know that Susan Sebastian's mother, Elise Braun, is watching by Skype. I'm so sorry that you could not be here. I am in awe and admiration of what you have done, how you have taken the words that I put down on paper and put them into practice to help heal, to help so many people heal. The scope of this project, the scale, is something I've never heard of. To put artwork in every patient room in every hospital in Vermont is quite amazing. I understand there's 1,200 beds total in Vermont, and the impact that you are having and going to have on health and well-being of patients in hospital is remarkable, and that's what I'm going to talk about today. There is a science behind this. So what a legacy from Susan Sebastian and from Elise Braun from the Susan Sebastian Foundation. I want to also thank the Southern Vermont Arts Center for hosting this amazing event, and the Southwestern Vermont Health Care system, as well as Gil Myers, who first contacted me to tell me about this wonderful project, and who was instrumental in choosing some of the art throughout the state. So thank you to all who participated in this amazing event. So the question that I'm going to talk to you about today is, can art help you heal? How many of you believe that art can help you heal? So yes, I guess we're in the right place to ask that question. So I can sit down and no, I won't. I'll tell you how that works. But first, I'll ask a question before that. How many of you believe that stress can make you sick? So for those of you who can't see, 100% of the audience believe that stress can make you sick. When I first had the courage to ask that question back in 1996 to an audience of hardcore physicians and scientists at the National Institutes of Health, about a third of the audience put up their hands very gingerly and quickly hid their hands behind their back in case their colleagues should notice that they believed in such a flaky notion. And they looked awfully stressed. But the good news is that in the 20 years since that time, a wealth of scientific information has been accumulated to prove not only that stress can make you sick, but how it can make you sick. And it's important to understand a little bit of that before we get to the question of how art can help you heal. So chronic stress, for example, if you're a caregiver of an Alzheimer's patient, if you're chronically stressed, it prolongs wound healing, speeds chromosomal aging, speeds cancer growth. There's an increased frequency and severity of viral infections, and if you go out to get a flu shot to protect yourself and your loved one from the flu, there'll be less of a take rate from that vaccine. And the reason is because when you're stressed, the stress hormones and nerve chemicals that are released prevent the immune system from doing its job to fight infection and help you heal. Now, I want to emphasize that stress does not cause the flu bug causes the flu. Stress does not cause wounding. Wounding causes wounding. Stress does not cause cancer. Your genes and exposure to many different environmental exposures cause cancer. Stress does not cause aging. Aging causes aging. unfortunately, although the alternative is not so good. But stress, through those nerve chemicals and hormones, prevents the immune system from fighting those conditions. So this is what happens. When you're chronically stressed, your brain's stress center starts pumping out hormones. Ultimately, your adrenal gland pumps out the hormone cortisol. You all know cortisol as cortisone, the most potent anti-inflammatory drug that your body makes. So when you're stressed, your adrenal glands are giving you multiple shots of that anti-inflammatory hormone, which is good to suppress inflammation, but not good when your immune cells need to be at their peak to fight infection. So if you're exposed to a bug, the bug wins. How many of you can believe that believing can make you well? So that's interesting. It's a little bit less enthusiastic response. I'd say maybe 80% believe that believing. I say believing in anything. Believing in yourself, in a pill, the placebo effect, believing in a higher power. When I asked that question, you heard that I was at the Vatican. When I asked that question when I spoke at the Vatican, there was a very enthusiastic, positive response. Yes, everybody believed that believing can make you well. It's harder to answer this question than the question of whether stress can make you sick. And this is relevant because it's also hard to answer the question of whether viewing art can make you well. And the reason is it's easier to stress a person, a fruit fly, a mouse, a cat, a rat, and measure something and say, therefore, that stress causes whatever it is you're measuring, than it is to say believe and then measure something. Now, the good news is there are many studies that are now showing that various kinds of integrative interventions that include meditation, mindfulness, prayer, it includes physical activity, yoga, tai chi, on and on. There's tremendous scientific evidence that, in fact, when you engage in those salubrious activities, there is a reduction in the stress response and an enhancement of what's called the relaxation response. So in addition to reducing the effect of those negative hormones and nerve chemicals on health and illness, there is an enhancement of positive chemicals and hormones, including endorphins, those anti-pain molecules in the brain, and dopamine, those feel-good molecules in the brain. So engaging in, this is integrative medicine, engaging in these kinds of activities by enhancing the relaxation response can allow your immune system to do its job to help you heal. Now, I think you may see where I'm going with this. That is, how does art tie into this? I'm just going to show you a little bit of data on integrative approaches and how they can actually prevent and reverse the negative effects of stress on chromosomes. So at the ends of chromosomes, there are little ends of chromosomes called telomeres. And they're kind of like the plastic ends of shoelaces. As your shoelace ages, the plastic end shortens and falls off, and the shoelace shortens and frays. The same thing happens with telomeres and your chromosomes. We can calculate your biological age by measuring the length of the chromosomes. And it turns out that people who are chronically stressed can have chromosomes that look 10 to 17 years older than your biological age. Now, for the young people in the audience, you may not care so much about that. Personally, I don't want to look 10 to 17 years older than my biological age. Dean Ornish has done studies in patients who were recovered from prostate cancer and showed that a simple mindfulness meditation 3 times a week, 30 minutes of walking a day, and a healthy Mediterranean diet not only prevented that shortening of chromosomes over a 5-year period, but reversed it. So, you know, it doesn't matter how old you are, at what stage of health or illness you are, you can do something to help by engaging in these kinds of activities. Now, does art have the same effect? Nobody's actually done these studies with art. Nobody has looked at whether being surrounded by art will have an effect on the length of your chromosomes. But there are studies that people have done that can help us to understand how art could possibly have beneficial effects, and I'm going to talk about that now. Usually when I talk, and the book, Healing Spaces, The Science of Place and Well-Being, is about many elements of place. How place can help you heal, how place can also stress. So we can start with a simpler question. Can place make you happy? How many of you think that place can make you happy? Oh, there's a very enthusiastic 100%. I should be taking notes here. Well, I'm going to tell you a little story here that illustrates how place can make you happy. When I was writing the book, Healing Spaces, I was invited to a dinner party in Georgetown in Washington, D.C. And the gentleman to my left asked me, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Well, I'm writing this book about how place and space around you can either make you anxious or give you hope and help you heal." And he said, "Oh, we used to do that all the time." And I was very surprised because I didn't think anybody had talked about this before. And I said, "Who are you and what did you do?" And he said, "I used to be vice president of Disney Imagineering." So I asked him, "How do you do that?" And he started to explain to me how in the Disney theme parks, they take people from a place of fear and anxiety to a place of hope and happiness. And I said to him, "You know, it'd be a lot easier, instead of you explaining this to me here at the dinner table, if I got a behind-the-scenes tour of Disneyland." So he said, "Okay, fine." So there I am, the only nerd in the theme park with a notepad. And it is pretty amazing how in the 1950s, John Hench and his Imagineers figured out through trial and error how to take people from a place of fear and anxiety to one of hope and happiness. It is not rocket science. There is no reason that these principles should not be applied to places like hospitals. There is a place that we all have in our minds that is associated with happiness, and that's paradise. If you close your eyes and imagine paradise, what is paradise to you? You can open your eyes now, otherwise you won't see the slides. There are many images of paradise throughout the ages. Painters throughout the ages have painted images of paradise. It is a place. If you Google the word paradise, depending on the day you Google it, there can be 50 million, sometimes 200 million images of paradise. And they are all images of nature. So we have in our collective consciousness an idea that there is or could be a beautiful healing place. And generally that's associated with nature. Now there are actually scientific studies to show that views of nature can help you heal and can make you happy. So one of the interesting things about virtually all the paintings in this amazing art show is that they are views of nature. And that's one of the things that Susan Sebastian and her mother Elise Braun took from my book and was part of the mission of this amazing foundation, is to have views of nature of Vermont. And there is a science to it, that views of nature can improve moods and help you heal. And I'll show you that now. Anybody from Chicago? One person. Okay, you will probably recognize this. Fortunately, this is the Robert Taylor homes. They fortunately no longer exist. These were the projects in inner city Chicago. And there was a famous study by Kuo and Sullivan where they looked at people who were randomly assigned to apartments with a grove of trees as a view or a blacktop as a view. And they found that those people, those families who had a view of a grove of trees had less aggressive behaviors, knew more people, had more social interactions, and had less violent behaviors than the people with a view of a blacktop. Now, why should this be? There are many studies that show that views of nature have this kind of effect on people. So you can ask, when you do a scientific study, you can look at it in two ways. You can ask, does a view of nature change your mood and help you heal? Or you can ask, how does it do it? Is it what you see? Is it what you hear? Is it what you smell? Is it what you touch? Is it what you do in a place that can help you heal? And the answer, of course, is all of the above. So in this talk, I'm going to focus on what you see, because that's really what we're talking about here. Whether looking at art can help you heal. I am fortunate to have this view out my window in Tucson, Arizona. This is a view of the Santa Catalina Mountains in Tucson. And it is an incredibly calming, for me, healing view. You have this view here in Manchester, Vermont. In South Burlington, we have the views of Mount Mansfield and the Adirondacks across the lake. Vermont is rich with this kind of sweeping vistas of mountains and sweeping vistas. Well, it turns out that that is a universally preferred scene. There are neuroscientists, researchers who have studied preferred scenes, preferred views across cultures, across ages, across socioeconomic groups, different genders. And in general, it is this kind of view, a sweeping vista, often with mountains, that are universally preferred. Irving Biederman at the University of Southern California, who does brain imaging on that part of the brain that recognizes a beautiful view, has a theory as to how this works, because there is a part of the brain that recognizes beautiful views. So the brain is not a bowl of mush. There are different parts of the brain that specialize in different things. So there's a part of the brain that recognizes animals, a part that recognizes tools, a part that recognizes faces, a part that recognizes buildings. When I speak to architects, they love the idea that there's a part of the brain that recognizes buildings. Maybe whoever designed the brain was an architect. But there is a part of the brain that recognizes beautiful views. And that part of the brain, this orange little dot here, is rich in endorphins, those feel-good anti-pain molecules. So Irving Biederman's theory is that perhaps the reason we all like to look at a beautiful view, the reason we will pay more for a room with a view, the reason we will pay more for a house with a view, is because we're giving ourselves a shot of endorphins every time we look at that view. Now, the question when you're talking about art is it good enough to look at a representation of a beautiful view as opposed to looking at a real beautiful view? And there are actually some studies that address that, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But when you're looking out the window at a beautiful view, there are different aspects that can impact you and change your mood and improve your mood. So it could be the light. It could be the quality of light. It could be the sunlight that improves your mood. We know from many, many studies that full spectrum sunlight, exposure to full spectrum sunlight, will improve seasonal affective disorder, that form of depression that is caused by exposure for long periods to low levels of light, mostly in northern climes. That's why I'm from Montreal originally. That's why, us Canadians go south to Vermont. And Americans think it's very funny when I say that we go south to Vermont. We always thought it was quite tropical down here. So full spectrum sunlight can improve moods not only in seasonal affective disorder, but also in many forms of depression, and in general in people who are not depressed. There are many aspects of place, which I'm not going to focus on because we're talking about art and what you see, that also can improve moods. Odors, smells, fragrances can improve mood. Lavender is known to be relaxing. It actually has a chemical effect and can put rats to sleep. So it's not that rats like aromatherapy. It actually has a chemical effect. But other aspects of what you smell come from your association of positive experiences that go with the smell. And that's the same for what you look at, for beautiful views as well. So if place can make you happy, can it also make you well? So this is a landmark study published in Science magazine, the top science journal, in 1984 by Roger Ulrich, who looked at patients. Again, this is similar to that Kuo and Sullivan study. He looked at patients who were randomly assigned to hospital beds with a view of a grove of trees or a view of a brick wall. And he found, and these were patients who all had undergone gallbladder surgery and were treated by the same doctors and nurses, had the same, many different aspects of their health were comparable. And he found that the patients who were beside a window with a view of a grove of trees needed less pain medication, had fewer negative nurses' notes, so they were in a better mood, and left hospital on average a day sooner than the patients with a view of a brick wall. So again, it's the same kind of thing, that we know that looking at a view of nature can help you heal. And you can ask, what is it about that view? You can also ask, what is it about place and space around you that can calm versus stress? So there are many elements of place that can help calm. Sound, calming nature sounds, light, diffuse light, not too much, not too little, comfortable temperature, humidity, beautiful views, fragrances, as I've mentioned, and labyrinths. I'll show you an example of a labyrinth. On the other hand, there are elements of place that can stress you. Noise, too much, too little. Light, too much, too little. Temperature, humidity, too much, too little. Crowding, foul odors, mazes. What kind of building does that remind you of? Fortunately, not here in Southwestern Vermont, because we know that the hospital system here is really paying attention to creating place for patients to heal. But for decades, those of us who were in the medical profession just assumed that a hospital was a noisy, crowded, smelly, dark, confusing maze. And it does not make any sense to put a patient who is already stressed and already anxious and already sick into a place which will make them more stressed, more anxious, and more sick. And so the good news is that there is a groundswell, a movement in the design professions, starting with healthcare design and expanding to all aspects of design, to create places and spaces that will reduce stress and help people heal. So I'm going to show you examples of this now. This is a labyrinth. Now, labyrinths are different from mazes. A maze, when you're in a maze, well, when I was writing my book, my editor said there are too many dusty old churches in here. You have to put something in here that young people will relate to. So she told me I have to read Harry Potter. How many of you have read Harry Potter? Oh, okay, enough, good number. The Goblet of Fire. Okay, I think chapter 4 in the Goblet of Fire is a perfect description of a maze, where you experience with Harry as he's going through this dark, confusing space, worried about possible dangers lurking within, trying to make decisions of where to go. That's a maze. You don't know where you're going. You can't see or hear. You don't have evidence of where to go to make your decisions. A labyrinth is different. A labyrinth is a pattern on the floor that you just follow. It's a walking meditation. This labyrinth is based on the original labyrinth in Chartres. Well, actually, there are many labyrinths going back to ancient times. A 13th century cathedral outside of Paris. And the monks used to walk these patterns to get themselves into a state of prayer and meditation. So we can ask the question, can place make you well or sick? And I've already answered that. Yes, it can. It certainly can. And by removing these negative features, these stressful features, place can help you heal. So the thesis of my book is that in many ways, place is the extension of integrative interventions like meditation, like Tai Chi, like belief, in that it could buffer the stress response, it can reduce stress, and kick in that relaxation response and those positive nerve chemicals in the brain. It's harder to do these studies in place, and I'll show you what we're doing at the University of Arizona to address this. So it's not rocket science to say, let's incorporate these features into place, especially hospitals, to help people heal. So I'll show you many examples here of hospitals that are incorporating these kinds of features into place. This is the entrance to the Diamond Children's Hospital in Tucson, Arizona. It looks like Disneyland. It's got lots of interactive buttons on the wall for the children to play with. There's art on the ceilings, art throughout the hospital. It's a happy experience for the children who come there and their families. This is Tucson Medical Center, where you can see the child here. The parents couldn't drag him away from this interactive wall exhibit. This is a play therapy center in South Korea, which people who can read Korean have told me that this is in a multi-use building where there's a noodle shop at the bottom. And the reason is this is a mental health facility for children, and there's a lot of stigma in South Korea, apparently, on mental health care for children. And so they name it just play therapy, and it does not look at all like a hospital, as you can see. This is a view out the window at the Tucson Medical Center, again, the Santa Catalina Mountains. Tucson Medical Center was designed originally as a tuberculosis sanatorium. People went to Arizona in the late 19th, early 20th century to heal from chronic illnesses like arthritis and tuberculosis. Something similar to people coming to the mountains here in the Northeast, in the Adirondacks and Saranac Lake, and I imagine around here, to help heal. And so Tucson Medical Center was built around many different patios, courtyards, so patients could be moved out into that healing environment. And the nursing staff had competitions to design each of these patios to focus on a different theme. This is the hummingbird patio. This focuses on family and social interactions. So when we talk about art, if we focus in on art rather than place and space, you can ask two questions about art, of how it can help you heal. And there's big differences. One is creating art, and the other is viewing art. And for those artists in the audience, I think part of the beneficial effect of creating art is it gets you into a kind of a meditative state. It takes you away from the rest of the world. You focus your attention on the here and now. And that's different from viewing art, although I think viewing art has some of those elements in it. So there are a number of studies that do look at whether viewing art can help heal. And most of these studies look at amount of medication that is dispensed, symptoms that occur. So in surgical procedures, there's a study that showed that there was better pain control, less pain medication needed. In cancer chemotherapy, less fatigue, less distress, less anxiety. In psychiatric patients, less anxiety, agitation, and less medication needed. These are pretty remarkable effects just from looking at art. This is an example of a study that was done by Professor Sean McCann at Trinity College Dublin in Ireland. Sean McCann founded the first and only bone marrow transplant unit in Ireland. And this is the unfortunate view out the window that those patients have. when you are getting a bone marrow transplant, you are in a room for 6 to 8 weeks. It is positive pressure, sterile, so that your immune system is completely protected from any germs that might come in from the outside. So you're isolated. People cannot come in, you can't go out for 6 to 8 weeks. And this is what these patients were looking at. And the reason is because Trinity College Dublin is in a 200-year-old, what used to be a Dickensian workhouse 200 years ago. So Sean McCann had this problem of could he help his patients in that horrible setting. So the first thing he did was he hired an artist to talk to the patients and to create art, because he said he didn't have money, so he couldn't purchase art, but he could purchase paint for the walls. And so he hired an artist, and the artist talked to the patients, and this is what he came up with. Now, when I looked at these images, to me, it really didn't do anything for me. But apparently, these are the colors and the patterns of the football leagues across Ireland. So what it did is the patients then began to talk about football and their favorite football players instead of thinking about their pain. So that was his first step. And then he went a step further. He created what is called the Open Window Project, which in many ways is similar to what the Susan Sebastian Foundation has done here in Vermont. And I'll describe to you what Sean McCann did in Ireland. So he installed LCD projectors on the ceilings of these rooms. He couldn't hang art in these rooms because they have to be sterile and it has to be washed down all the time, and you really can't do that with art. So he installed these special LCD projectors that could be washed down. And then he projected images of art on the walls. He created a simple app so that even patients who were very sick and very weak could click on and choose, like you're choosing a TV station, the preferred scene or the preferred image that they wanted to see. They did this very systematically, just like the Susan Sebastian Foundation has done, which is that they had teams of multidisciplinary teams that included physicians, nurses, healthcare staff, artists, art historians, and they worked together to curate this art. It was both iconic art and modern art from current Irish artists who would send in images of their art as they were creating it day by day. So if you wanted to see the art as it progressed, you could do that too. And he came up with many different kinds of scenes. If you can imagine, this is the bed, the patient's bed, and this is one of the views that they showed. This is another, The Smoke Tree by John Gerard, who's a very well-known Irish artist. His work, actually, I think this image itself is a moving image, and it is in the Hirshhorn Museum in Washington, D.C. So when they interviewed patients and said, what would you like to see? The majority of them said they wanted to see views of nature. Sweeping vistas, cows and horses grazing. There's an image here on the wall of sheep grazing. There's sweeping vistas. There's views of nature. This is all what Susan Sebastian Foundation has done and is doing to put into these hospital rooms in Vermont. They also wanted to see pictures of family and loved ones. Some of them had individual reactions. So, you know, there are universally preferred scenes, but of course there's individual taste, and you have to take that into account too. There was one patient who liked to walk his dog on Dunleary Pier and watch the boats go by. So Sean McCann made an agreement with the city of Dublin to install a webcam on Dunleary Pier so that this patient could watch in real time the boats going by on Dunleary Pier. Another patient liked to watch the construction across the street from his apartment building. So they installed a webcam there and he could see the building go up across the street. So there are obviously individual tastes, individual preferences, but there are also universally preferred views. And in this study, Sean McCann found that patients who had the opportunity to be exposed to this kind of art had reduced anxiety, reduced depression, and better quality of life in their 6 to 8 week trial getting chemotherapy. This is important also for senior housing, for assisted living, for senior residential communities. This is an increasing need because of us, the baby boomers, who are rapidly approaching this point in our lives, aging in place. And how can we do this? How can we create environments in which we can age more gracefully? So there are very specific things that you can do to design the physical environment to enhance independence for as long as possible, increase wayfinding, reduce the need for memory in order to get to places, reduce stress and anxiety, and reduce falls. So it's the first part of memory that goes in Alzheimer's disease is memory of place. So when you're designing, when design professionals are creating spaces for people who are beginning to lose their memory, they can include elements in design that can make up for the lack of memory of place, and they call this mental prostheses. So if you lose the function of an arm or a leg, you can wear a prosthesis to help you accomplish that function. If you lose your memory of place, you can designers can design space and place to help you be independent for longer. So this is the Waveney Assisted Living in New Canaan, Connecticut. And you can see that it has a Main Street-like space, looks very much like Disneyland. This was absolutely on purpose because most of the residents in this community come from towns that have main streets. So familiarity is very important. Landmarks for navigation are important. And art can serve as a landmark. If you have a piece of art outside your own room, something that you remember, that you know, it'll help you to find that room even if you don't remember how to get to that room. There are areas of social support, views to daylight so that you know whether it's night or day, time for breakfast or dinner, and sight lines to the bathroom. Why should you have to remember where the bathroom is? If you wake up and you look at it and it's right there, you don't have to remember and you can be independent for longer. This is Hacienda on the River, a new assisted living community that's being built in Tucson, Arizona, and you can see art figures importantly. It's a home-like atmosphere. Now, we were talking earlier about the financial case for this. There is a financial case for incorporating these kinds of design elements and also for art into places that we design in hospitals. Most of these studies have been done in hospitals. So the Center for Health Design in San Francisco looked at 50 different hospitals across the United States where they had retrofitted different wings, whether it was an emergency room or an intensive care or a cardiac unit or a pediatric unit, and they looked at the health benefits of those retrofits. And they found that there were tremendous health benefits. There were decreased patient falls, decreased medical errors, decreased hospital infections, decreased pain medication use, decreased nursing turnover, increased staff satisfaction, and increased patient and family satisfaction. And if you add up the cost of putting in those kinds of features in all of those 50 different retrofits, the Center for Health Design came up with an added cost of about $12 million to build such a fable hospital. But if you add up the cost saving from all of those beneficial effects, you save almost $12 million in the first year of operation. So that's the financial case for you, for the Southwestern Health Care Center. It's worth it. It's worth it for the patients. It's worth it for the bottom line. Now, what about art? So there is one study in the literature that I found that does look at the financial case for art. And it was a multi-center study with the first author was Dr. Nanda and his team. And I want to point this out because this kind of study needs multidisciplinary teams to do these kinds of studies. So they had American Art Resources, Interior Design, Texas A&M Architecture, Department of Psychiatry. It really requires a team that incorporates all of these disciplines in order to do these kinds of measures. And what they found in this study where they looked at the effect of art on anxiety and agitation in a mental hospital, they put art in a common room. So it wasn't in the patient's rooms, it was in a common room where these acute psychiatric patients spent some portion of their day, maybe 50% of their day, in that common room. So they weren't in there all the time. And they left the art there for 2 weeks. They did not tell the nurses what they were doing or why they were putting the art there or not. And then they looked at the amount of medication that was dispensed, the PRN medication for agitation or violent behavior or anxiety. And they measured the number of episodes of these behaviors. And they found a significant reduction in the condition where they had mainly nature art in this common room. A reduction in all of these behaviors and the PRN medication, and they were able to calculate about a $20,000 saving simply by putting art in the common room. Now, how simple is that? It's not going to have side effects. It's not going to have any risks. And it was nature art. They had modern art, they had representations of nature, this is Van Gogh, and they had other kinds of stock photography. And in every case, it was the nature art that improved the condition of the patients and saved the hospital money. There are not very many studies like these. These are hard to do. But I think that there is the beginning of evidence that this kind of intervention can certainly help moods and help people heal. I don't want to spend too much time on other aspects of this, but the concept of designing place and space to improve well-being is extending to building design, schools. This is the General Services Administration that builds and maintains all federal buildings in Washington, D.C. You can see that they have this beautiful view of the Potomac and the monuments, and art, a beautiful modern art hanging piece. It's extending to schools. Most of the work being done in schools now is looking at putting in gardens, views of nature. There's no reason why it couldn't include art as well. This is an example in Tucson, Arizona, of the Sonoran Desert Garden outside the College of Architecture, Planning and Landscape Architecture at the University of Arizona. And it attracts students to study in this beautiful space in what used to be a parking lot. And I can tell you, in the summer in Tucson, parking lots are about 130 degrees. You can fry an egg on the pavement. It also has implications for urban design. Most of what's being done in urban design is increasing walkability, putting in gardens, views of nature. I noticed driving up the hill here to the Southwestern Arts Center that there are beautiful sculptures throughout the woods as you drive up. And that's urban art. I don't know that people have really studied the impact of urban art, but people are beginning to study many other aspects of the physical environment at an urban scale and how important that is to reduce stress and improve well-being. We're doing a project with the U.S. military, with the National Military Medical Center in Bethesda, Maryland, Walter Reed National Military Medical Center, where there is a forest glen that they are retrofitting so that the wounded warriors can walk from their residences to the hospital through a calming forest glen, as opposed to through this busy street. It's really a military base, so there's a lot of traffic that goes on in the base. And I put this in here because before the talk, one of the media asked me, what about forest views? Sometimes that can make people anxious, and it's true. Sweeping vistas do not make people anxious, but forest views can either calm or they can actually be fearful, and it depends on your associations. We had a lot of discussions with the military because post-traumatic stress disorder is associated with fear of shadows, dark places where you don't know whether somebody's lurking there. When you're on the battlefield, you need to be vigilant. You need your stress response to be working for you so that you get out of danger as soon as it's needed. When you're not on the battlefield, that's another story. But there are ways to retrofit forest glens, and there are ways to paint or do photographs of forest glens, as I'm sure you can see on many of the paintings here, that do not include those scary, dark corners. It's the light, I think, that helps, diffuse light that helps reduce that anxiety. The challenge is whether, when, and how to prove that these different elements of the environment can help you heal. Whether it's the physical structure, whether it's windows, whether it's views, whether it's music, I haven't talked about music, whether it's art on the wall. And so our answer, and the reason I moved to the University of Arizona, is to create an Institute on Place and Well-Being where we can develop methods to measure these kind of interventions in a very sophisticated way. So the Institute on Place and Well-Being is a partnership between the College of Medicine, the Center for Integrative Medicine, and the College of Architecture, Planning, and Landscape Architecture, and many other colleges and centers across the university. And our goal is to do research, to develop methods to prove how these interventions can help you heal. It is to develop curriculum to train the next generation and the current generation on how to do this. It is to change policy so that these kinds of interventions become second nature. Why should a hospital be a noisy, crowded, smelly place? It should be a calming, beautiful place. And one of our goals is to instantiate these principles into practice. And one of the amazing things about this mission of the Susan Sebastian Foundation is that without me even lifting a finger, you have done that. You have taken these principles and put them into practice in every hospital in Vermont. So I thank you for accomplishing our mission without me having to do any work. Except writing the book. So how are we doing this? We're taking state-of-the-art wearable technologies to measure every possible aspect of physiological, psychological health, behavior, well-being, and linking it to many different aspects of the environment, measures of this in real time. And it's quite a challenge. It requires huge multidisciplinary teams, but it's very exciting, and we are getting there. So it may not be too long when we can actually measure with quantitative real-time wearable devices how all this art is changing people's moods and helping them heal. So this is the new frontier of health. It is patient, person, and place-centered health and well-being. I like to call it M-well-being, mobile well-being. You know, we carry our health around with us, and we can measure it at every moment of the day. And this is the future. This is where healthcare is going. It is impacting policy. We briefed the Surgeon General's office, the acting Surgeon General. The Surgeon General has a National Prevention Council, which includes 26 agencies of the federal government, all of the cabinet, all of the agencies of the president's cabinet. And the goal is to find ways to improve health and well-being in every agency, whatever the mission. And so this is going to happen. And part of this is to improve communities, to create healthy and safe community environments. And that can be at every scale, whether it's at the urban scale, at the built scale, or whether it's in hospitals with art. It is the new frontier of green design to include human health and well-being outcomes in green design standards. This is a movement across the design industry. The American Institute of Architects that helps set standards for design professionals, licensing of design professionals, the U.S. Green Building Council, many agencies of the federal government, the Australian Institute of Architects, Australian Green Building Council, and you heard about the Vatican, are all interested in including human health and well-being outcomes in design of their spaces. The reason the Vatican is interested is that the Catholic healing orders run 120,000 hospitals around the world, and they want to know how to do this. So actually, the Susan Sebastian Foundation can maybe advise. So you, yourself, you who are healthcare professionals, can help people find and create their healing place. Even if it's a tiny place, even if it's a small cubicle, they can put their little favorite picture or painting or a picture of a loved one or a little bit of green plants in that space. I'm going to end by reading to you from the last chapter of my book, Healing Spaces, The Science of Place and Well-Being. The chapter is called Healing Gardens and My Place of Peace. My father and I sat on the terrace outside the kitchen door, eating breakfast early on a spring morning. He had propped a book against his outsized coffee mug, an old white china cup with the word Dad inscribed on it. I didn't have to leave for school for at least an hour, and my mother and sister were still getting dressed. My father looked up at me from his book and smiled as I ate my cereal. Listen to the sounds of peace, he said. I heard a dog barking, birds chirping, the pock-pock of a volley on the tennis courts across the street. These sounds did not seem unusual to me. I heard them all the time. Not until many years later, after my father died, did I mention what they meant to him. He'd spoken those words in the mid-1950s when the war in Europe was only a decade behind him, still so fresh in his mind that he could appreciate such quiet moments and revel in a sense of peace. His favorite psalm was the 23rd. Sometimes after dinner, he would pull a Bible off the shelf and sit at the table and read it to my sister and me. Every once in a while, he would look up at us with a smile that contained both wisdom and calm. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I shall fear no evil. My father had walked through the valley of the shadow of death during the war, somewhere in a concentration camp, in a place called Transnistria. I found that out after he died. He had never talked about it. The reason I put this in this book is, to me, the 23rd Psalm is the essence of a healing place. And I think it is universally. The still waters, the green pastures, even when you are in the shadow of the valley of death, seeing, whether you actually see through a window those green pastures, or still waters, whether you see them in a beautiful painting like we see here, or whether you see them in your mind by remembering this poem or a beautiful place, it will help you heal. And so I thank the Susan Sebastian Foundation, Elise Braun. Susan Sebastian, in her memory, she has left an incredible legacy that will help so many others as they navigate through the valley of the shadow of death. So I thank you.